Michael J?
Well, with the Pro Tours, I guess, coming up, Players Tours coming up, probably should talk about some Pioneer. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And we definitely have a lot of results as a result, if nothing else, of MITGO. I mean, there's been an invitational qualifier tournament as well, but the amount of leagues and showcases and challenges, obviously there are a number of people who are preparing for all the various Players Tours, because like 3 of these going on does kind of mean that there's 3 PTs, so there's 3 times as many PT players. Anyway,
3 times as many gigantic top 8 deck lists to be revealed in a short period of time, at least.
Yeah, definitely. And it also helps that Theros Beyond Death has had an impact.
That's an understatement, I think. An impact.
So, I mean, might as well start off with the talk of the town, Heliod Suncrowned. The various Heliod Walking Ballista decks.
Yeah. So there are at least 3 different builds, probably more than that, that are like highly recognizable, right?
Right. So maybe starting off with QB Turtle 15's 5-0 Pioneer Prelim deck. Did you see this one? It's
I did.
White Devotion deck.
I bought all the cards in this deck just in case. Just
preemptively.
I know. I mean, just in case, So who knows what's going to happen? We're going to have to register our decks, a week from now or something. But depending on what sweet stuff comes out at is it the Japanese Players Tour this week or the European one? Either way or both. Just want to make sure I had a serviceable deck of some sort. So this is basically the white weenie, the default white weenie build of Heliod Suncrowned Walking Ballista combo.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, it's a version of that. I mean, you come out swinging with Thraben Inspector. I don't know. This isn't as white aggro as it could be, though. It's definitely got a lot of white aggro to it. But I mean, Anafenza Kintree Spirit, Arcanist Owl. This is a version that's trying.
Yeah. So I think the thing about this deck is it's got basically 3 things going on. One of the things going on is it can attack. It's got some attack phase. It's got 1-drops. It's got many 2-drops. It's got Anafenza. It's got Daxos at 2. But this deck is very, very distinctive in the raw number of white pips, right? So it's got, the 1-drops are clearly 1 white. Anafenza is double white. Daxos is double white. It's got quadruple white from Arcanist Owl. And, of course, Arcanist Owl is a tutor that can get either side of the combo. It can get an enchantment, like Heliod, and it can get an artifact, like Walking Ballista.
Yeah, it also has the ability to find Quarantine Field or Stasis Snare or even Alseid of Life's Bounty.
Yeah.
So there are plenty of hits, And, I mean, if nothing else, go get your Heliod God of the Sun, seeing as QB Turtle 15 has 5 Heliods in their deck.
Yeah, maybe Heliod God of the Sun is sweet in this deck because people could be confused about which Heliod it was, and then they throw their erase or whatever at it. And then they're like, oh no, it was the wrong Heliod. Or maybe not. Probably.
Yeah, I don't know about all that. But it is an indestructible threat that gives your creatures vigilance. So what do you think of this particular build? It sounds like you like it a fair bit if you went ahead and jumped out and already just preemptively purchased the deck on spec.
Yeah, so it's got some extra juice. So example, right? You have some little freebie triggers that you can get. So if you've got Daxos on turn 2, Heliod on turn 3, on turn 4 you can just play your 4th land. This is quote a white weenie deck, but it's got 25 lands, and you can play your Walking Ballista for only 2 mana for a 1/1 Walking Ballista, but then Daxos hooks you up. You get a little life gain there, freebie +1/+1 counter, and then you can rock and roll, strut and stroll. Anafenza has got some bolster action also, so if you start on Anafenza on turn 2, then I believe that works also, right? So if you play a 1/1 Walking Ballista, that's the smallest guy in the squad, right? And you can You can put a +1/+1 counter on Walking Ballista and get the party started that way. So either of those are ways to basically cheat. We talked previously that it's very difficult to go from 3 to 4 to the kill because you need at least a 2/2 Walking Ballista. Typically, that's going to require all 4 of your mana unless you've got some sort of cheats like Bolster or Daxos or something like that to get an extra +1/+1 counter.
Yeah, you can also cheat, as you say, mana by using Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. This is a deck with a lot of pips, as you identified earlier. Going for it all in one big turn is actually very doable in this deck because of Nykthos. Like, when you draw Nykthos, it's just not unreasonable to think that you're going to be able to put together 7 or 9 mana,
Oh, absolutely. And, I mean, this isn't even really, like, one of the crazy Nykthos white decks, right? Like, there are some that, like, go even harder on Nykthos to do the same thing. Like, obviously this deck has got, as we said, a ton of white pips, but when you start hitting the decks that have like main deck 4 Leyline of Sanctity or something, those people mean it, right? They're like, we're going for pips.
Totally. Idyllic Grange. This particular plains obviously comes into enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 3 or more plains. It has the enters the battlefield, like when you get to play it as your 4th land, assuming you don't already have like a Castle Ardent Vale or a Nykthos, which in that case, other stuff's going on. But like if you play Idyllic Range as your 4th land, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. And it's not like it comes into play tap there under that circumstance, but that has the advantage of you can potentially do the Walking Ballista stuff a little bit faster.
If you were going to do that, like with the turn 4 cheats, like I was describing before, you would have to start on plains, right? So you can't mess around with a Castle Ardent Vale or Nykthos as your first 3 lands.
Right, which is okay, because I mean this is a deck with a lot of plains, 18 other plains besides the Grange. But the having that extra option as an extra way to speed you up a little bit, that's not bad.
So what do you think about this strategy overall?
Well, sorry, just one last note on the Idyllic Range. That part of the value you're getting is that you Knight of the White Orchid for it. Like, it's frequently going to be the case that when you Knight of the White Orchid, the Knight of the White Orchid is going to go find Idyllic Range obviously if you're on turn 2 and you only have 2, no problem. You might be just happy anyway. But if you can Knight of the White Orchid when you have 3 plains in play, it's actually like a really sick tutor target, right?
Oh, that's really
just for value sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually
it costs you nothing in that spot.
Strictly better than a typical play, right?
Yeah, as long as the opportunity cost is that sometimes you're going to draw the Grange and it's going to enter the battlefield tapped on the first 3 turns. But as long as you never draw it,
it's just always on the bonus.
Yeah, your Knight of the White Orchid's just like meaningfully better.
So I'm looking at QB Turtle 15's sideboard, and they had 1 copy of Fragmentize on the sideboard. What do you think about Fragmentize?
I think it doesn't exile, so that's interesting.
I think it's also a sorcery.
I generally like 1-cost interaction.
Yeah.
What's the alternative that you would present? Because I think Fragmentize is actually excellent when you face decks like one of these In Soul decks. Fragmentize is like such a great way to interact with them. It's not like you're bringing it in for the mirror match. That's not what it's for. It's for decks like, say, Flash 65's list. It was like, this is one of those, is it In Soul Artifact, Stone Coil Serpent, Skilled Animator, Ginger Brute, Bomat Courier, Ghost Fire Blade, Shrapnel Blast decks? Obviously they took a big hit losing Smuggler's Copter, but here we see the slack being picked up by 1 copy of the Royal Scions, 1 copy of Hazaret the Fervent, 1 copy of Lightning Strike, 1 copy of Emery, Lurker of the Lock. Just stuff, Oh,
I think that this deck is just fine. I actually saw a lot of is it in Soul play over the weekend at Magic Fest, New Jersey. I found the Royal Science to be very impressive. I think Emery's awesome in this deck. I mean, Ginger Brute is fantastic in this deck. I think they're going to be fine.
Not playing Fort Beaumont Courier seems crazy to me.
I agree with you. I think Beaumont Courier is outstanding. It's so outstanding that it's been readopted by a lot of these red decks. There's at least like 3 or 4 different distinct builds of, medium or medium fast red decks, and Beaumont Courier is back there as well. But I mean, this strategy, the blue, red, and soul deck, I think is going to be a substantial player. It's one of the faster offensive decks. When it gets its draw, and I'd say like specifically Darksteel Citadel plus and Soul Artifact, with like maybe just a Shrapnel Blast in hand, there are a fair number of decks that can just never beat that draw in game 1, which sounds like kind of weird. They just have like this large indestructible creature that just smashes, and then they have a Shrapnel Blast in hand.
Sure. So I take it you're not as big a fan of Fragmentize as, like, say, Erase.
I don't even like Erase best, although I can be.
You could be persuaded.
So you and I, years and years ago, had a discussion about Erase versus Deicide, and I think you were correct in that Erase was better in that standard format than Deicide. But I'm wondering now if Deicide doesn't get a little extra consideration. One of the main things that you might want to get is a god, and removing all copies of it is kind of awesome, right? So I think like
costing 1 is also awesome, though.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can't play too much of these things, right? So if you've got room for like 2 erases, or an erase and a Deicide or something like that, might be a lot of sideboard space already. So I think that if you're going to make your pick, you're going to have to make the pick that you think is going to be most meaningful. Obviously, costing 1 is insane. At the same time, if you're playing against a deck whose primary way to win, look, this deck's primary way to win isn't necessarily the Walking Ballista combo, but there are some decks, I think, whose primary way to win is reliant on having, let's say, an indestructible god in play. In that case, you can murderize them with Deicide. Like it's horrendous. You do it during their draw step, and they're just shuffling up for game 2, or actually probably game 3. This is not probably going to be in game 1.
Yeah, I don't know about main deck Deicide at this point in the metagame, but who knows? Maybe the future. So in other Daxos, or not Daxos, but rather Heliod combo news, Paz de Jamban, their 5th place Pioneer Challenge list from a couple days ago is a Celestia take, a green-white take, taking advantage of Collected Company's ability to help find Heliod and generally just be a good card. Obviously, you can't really collect a company into Walking Ballista all the time. However, Banalish Marshall is actually a combo. Like, if you go get Banalish Marshall, then your Walking Ballista can live. And what's more, Militia Bugler is another sort of soft library manipulation in lieu of the Arcanist.
It's funny. I think I also bought this entire deck, but then I forgot in the middle, and so I think I might have just not bought like the Militia Buglers and the Selfless Spirit. But I was like, oh, this might be a thing to do as well. You're right. Collected Company is insane at potentially putting together the combo. If you have Banalish Marshall on 3, you can company into a 0/0 Walking Ballista, right? And a Heliod potentially. The Walking Ballista won't die because of the Banalish Marshall. Is that correct?
Yeah, you won't have any counters to shoot with, though. So if you played on offense on... Dude, yeah, true. But in particular, if you go on offense so that you can get the counter immediately.
Oh, well. That's fun.
And then this deck has Charming Prince. Obviously, Scry 2, more digging for the combo. Gain 3 life. Well, it could potentially be a combo with Heliod. Or Blink something, which matters for the Bugler in particular, or the Inspector, but it's a little slow.
Knight of the White Orchid, might get some action there. I don't know about... What do you think about Charming Prince? It seems like a relatively low power card relative to...
I was thinking the exact same thing. I was thinking the exact same thing.
On-Offensive is like, when On-Offensive is On-Offensive is on. Benevolent Marshal, tons of white pips, insane amount of impact. Like, this card is a 3/3 for 3, and has that text. Daxos, obviously, a bomb. Heliod, a bomb. Knight of the White Orchid, conditionally a backbreaker. Bugler, card advantage. I think, like, Charming Prince is fine.
I guess, if it's that good. So, yeah, I agree. I think it's a little underpowered, considering I don't think it exactly ties the whole room together or anything. But maybe it's fine.
I mean, it does help regulate your...
It helps. It does help. It's in the right direction. But the thing is, so are some of the other cards you're not playing 4 of. So,
you make a compelling case.
What's the other version of I guess the other version of Helii combo that was part of year 3?
So I actually don't know which event it was in, but it was an enchantment based one that's got main deck. Leyline of Sanctity to, zero out some pips to begin with. There's tons of, like, defensive enchantments. It had, like, Sky Tether. It was a 5-0 list from one of the Pioneer Leagues. It was, like, Sky Tether, Banishing Light, Silk Wrap, Shatter the Sky. So it was, like, the exact opposite of a creature deck. It has, like, I guess a plan A. I'm not sure which one is plan A of the Heliod plus Walking Ballista combo, and then its plan B is just tons of defensive enchantments, removal, and like one Sigil of the Empty Throne, which is, of course, insane in that kind of a deck.
Yeah. So I'm not sure which one that one was, because I saw that one too, but there's actually at least a couple other versions. Like there's the Soul Sisters kind of take. So there's like the soft Soul Sisters, Ajani Pridemate. It's not even Soul Sisters, really. It's just Ajani Pridemate in a deck that has Healer's Hawk and Legion's Landing. Yeah. As sort of a little bit of a dimension.
I played against a deck like that last weekend. But that version's pretty cool because it's just to give it a different way to cheat, right? If you have a Healer's Hawk in play, you can cheap out the Walking Ballista attack and then just get the lifelink off of the attack. Much the same way as you would with Daxos, to put a counter on the Ballista.
And then there's the Legends version, like the Ajani Pridemate, but with Legends, with 3 copies of Mox Amber. You fuel it with Tomic, Distinguished Advocate, Linden, the Steadfast Queen, Kithion, Hero of Akrois, obviously Heliod, and Daxos. And then there's Anafenza, Kintry Spirit, and Gisela, the Broken Blade.
Ooh. Is there another half to Gisela in that build anywhere?
Sadly, no.
I think I would have to. I think I would just feel a moral compunction to finish the combo off.
That's a little pricey for this 20 land deck, but...
I don't know. I think I would still feel it. I'd have to do it.
And then this one's even got Leonin Vanguard for extra life gain and fast aggro. Like, this is definitely a different sort of take. Disenchant is a little wild out of the sideboard. That's kind of old school.
Well, so here's the thing about Disenchant. It can hit a wide variety of targets at instant speed.
True. True.
You might not be able to RFG the god, but, depending on what their mana situation is, you might just be able to kill the Walking Ballista before it initiates the infinite combo. Right? Like,
True.
If they've only got 6 or something, an instant speed removal spell actually messes them up. So, I think that's it's a non-zero consideration. People still play Disenchant in Legacy.
I think Archangel Avacyn is interesting out of the sideboard of a Walking Ballista deck. Obviously, if you've got Archangel Avacyn in your grip, if you board in Archangel Avacyn, you can just take the counters off your backup plan Walking Ballista in order to ensure that, if you ever just need to make sure that you do the damage,
Yeah.
Like having a non-angel creature die so that you can transform Avacyn. 3 copies of Tomic Distinguished Advocates, man. You were speaking the praises of this one last week, too.
Tomic, I mean, obviously your mileage is going to vary on Tomic. The Mox version that you were describing is going to get a little extra mileage out of Tomic just because of that legendary synergy. And if you're playing against green decks, Tomic is your best friend. And if you're playing against other decks, it's just a very good card. Mono Black is one of the most successful archetypes in Pioneer right now. I believe it won at least one of the PTQs that went on at Magic Fest New Jersey last weekend. And I mean, just a 2/3 is really, really good against a deck full of 2/1s. It's just contextually a nice body for its cost in this format. There's a lot of 2/2s and 2/1s for 2.
Well, I think that's part of the reason why, for instance, Lu Shen, their list from the 28th featured a couple copies of Grasp of Darkness instead of Hero's Downfall. Grasp of Darkness, like that's for dealing with those 2/3s.
I mean, it's a medium played card. What's interesting to me is there's variation, I think, in all of these macro archetypes. You see some pushes, some grasps, varying numbers of Kalidases, various numbers of Rankles, at Spawn of Mayhem, all fighting over this 4 slot, as well as variations on the removal. Although I think most of them tend to play a lot of Murderous Riders.
So it's a completely different archetype, but it is not archetype, I guess. It's a completely different deck. The cards are different, but it is a combo deck. Yuyan has an example, an early draft of the Chronic Flooding Underworld Breach deck.
Talk to me about this deck in particular. Let us discuss how it can be defeated and how quickly it can kill. Because I have heard this deck can win on turn 4 at a pretty good rate, and it's pretty difficult to disrupt.
So, when you get Chronic Flooding down, Chronic Flooding is 1 and a blue enchantment. When Enchanted Land becomes tapped, his controller puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into the graveyard. So you put you put Chronic Flooding on one of your own lands, so that every time you tap that land, you mill yourself for 3. Now you're going to try to untap that land a lot and tap it again, partly because untapping and tapping land is its own reward. You just get a lot of mana. But you're also going to be trying to mill yourself a lot. Vizier of Tumbling Sands lets you, whether it's in play untapping or cycling untapping. Hidden Strings gives you a recurring way. Pour Over the Pages. All these different ways can incidentally be used to mill. But the real juice is when you find an Underworld Breach. You see, if you Underworld Breach, you can just play Hidden Strings over and over and over again. Every time, or any of your other cards. Because every time you Hidden Strings and it costs 2 mana, you get to mill yourself. You then untap your land that has a Chronic Flooding on it, and then you untap another land that has a Chronic Flooding on it. So you haven't spent any mana. You don't even have to. They don't even both have to have Chronic Flooding on them. You could just have one. The point is that once you have Hidden Strings going with Underworld Breach and Chronic Flooding, every single time you Hidden Strings, you exile 3 cards for Underworld Breach, and then you untap the 2 lands you tap to play it, and then when you tap the land again, you'll mill yourself for 3 more cards. So you can just cycle all the way through your deck, put your entire deck into your graveyard. And obviously, when you find anything that lets you get ahead, great. But at the end of the day, all you really need to do is find your one-off Thassa's Oracle. And when you have no cards in your deck, instead of spending your 2 mana on Hidden Strings, you spend it on Thassa's Oracle.
So the nature of the deck is such that even if you mill Thassa's Oracle, Underworld Breach allows you to escape that card from the graveyard, right?
Yeah, yes. Underworld Breach lets you play any non-land card from your graveyard. The other thing you can do is if you get Fae of Wishes, now you know you have to actually do it, but if you can get Fae of Wishes, which if you got enough mana, you can like Fae of Wishes, bounce it to your hand, play it as granted, but you've got a Jace Wielder of Mysteries in your sideboard, which obviously wins when you have no cards in your deck.
So this deck thrives on the idea that, especially in game one, the opponent isn't going to have like a key counter spell, right? Because like one
or Graveyard Haste, the big
absorb
one.
just messes you up, right? Like,
pretty bad, but not as bad as Leyline of the Void, for instance.
Yeah. So it's interesting, like many ways that typically you would endeavor to like interact with a deck like this just don't do anything, but other cards just seem very, very effective against it. Like Deafening Silence, that relatively new card, it's like white. You can only play one non-creature spell per turn. Like that seems like it would mess this deck up pretty bad, right? I think
incredibly.
Like Rest in Peace, I think is very good, but it doesn't auto win, right? You can
not at all.
You just have to play. You just have to not use Underworld Breach to win, right? So it's like a little bit of a slower grind, but you can still win.
Because you're still milling yourself with Chronic Flooding. So, and then you can still find your one Thassa's Oracle. You just gotta not mill your Thassa's Oracle. So, like, that's part of the reason why you got to be careful, because one of the things you do, it's a slow grind, but you eventually try to set up a situation where you actually just dig through time to ensure where your – because once you dig through time and you put your one-off Thassa's Oracle or your one Fae of Wishes on the bottom of your deck in a certain spot, now you never have to worry about it, and you can just Chronic Flooding. You can make huge amounts of mana. A Dig Through Time may seem expensive without a graveyard, but when you've got Lotus Field and you can actually untap the Lotus Field with your Hidden Strings or your Pour Over the Pages or your Vizier of Tumbling Sands, whatever. And besides, you do have alternate victory conditions. Like, for instance, you can Fae of Wishes for Bolas's Citadel. Bolas's Citadel can do 10 to your opponent, and you can untap it very easily with your Vizier of Tumbling Sands and just do 20. Takes a lot of permanence, but it's a plan.
Or you could just get Niv Mizzet Perun, which is very likely to resolve, and if it's there, has always been a reliable sized creature for a reasonable amount of mana.
Definitely. And Lotus Field makes it trivial to play despite no actively red lands in your deck.
Mana Confluence takes exception to that.
No, I'm saying obviously Lotus Field does it too. I just mean like specifically red, like Yavimaya Coast is specifically blue and green.
How do you think like Field of Ruin or other land destruction type cards is against this deck? Think like pretty good or just?
Nah, I mean it's okay. It's not totally ineffective. Part of the problem is that Lotus Field has hexproof.
Yeah.
So you can put Chronic Flooding on the Lotus Field. So it's just not a very reliable plan, right? Like it's better than a sharp stick in the eye, but like I wouldn't count on that as like, oh yeah, this is like Tron. That's my plan is I'm just gonna go after their land. The other thing is they can do some pretty sick things with Thespian Stage. So you can sometimes get them with Field of Ruin where you can make it awkward for them to actually be able to Thespian Stage. It doesn't completely ruin them or anything, but like if you can like Field of Ruin the Thespian Stage before they actually like in a spot where they have the shields down, the problem is that it still just keeps coming down to Lotus Field having hexproof just makes it so hard for you to really reliably get your money with land destruction.
I mean, Lotus Field is such a poor sport in my opinion. So that card has hexproof, so you can't destroy it, which I guess gives an incentive to play the card. Like otherwise, no one would ever play.
Well, you can destroy it. Like 7 o'clock bedtimes 5-0 list of Heliod combo had a Fall of the Thran in the sideboard.
Ooh,
yeah,
mess that up temporarily.
Of course, they also have Deafening Silence and Rest in Peace.
Yeah, so I think like if you really want to beat this deck, you can go like Deafening Silence. You can go Rest in Peace. You can go Gideon of the Trials. Gideon of the Trials is a nice one. That one's pretty hard to interact with. So, just get yourself an emblem, and, it's going to be a tough time for the Lotus Field combo deck. But this,
I also just... Oh, go ahead.
This deck, It seems to me, especially in Game 1 situations, this deck has got to have a great deal of friendship with the London Mulligan, and it will probably thrash most of the aggro decks.
It's pretty fast, and it's not vulnerable to creature kill. So that's like a pretty compelling dimension for a deck to have.
Yeah. I don't even know how you interact with it other than just killing it straight out if you're an aggro deck, right?
Well, white has a million answers. Rest in Peace, Deafening Silence, even Erase is useful.
Just to slow down the flooding.
Yeah, that's a real bit. If you can get rid of the flooding, it's not like they're getting anywhere if they just try to do the mana stuff. I mean, they do, but they're slow enough that you could conceivably overrun them. Plus, it's not like a Walking Ballista Heliod deck is slow.
Oh yeah, I think that on the fundamentals, the Walking Ballista deck is of similar speed, and its fastest draws are, I think, comparable or faster to the Chronic Flooding deck's draws. And obviously, that deck almost always has more fundamentals than this deck. This deck is a lot of air. If you don't have a Lotus Field and or Chronic Flooding available, your deck is Hidden Strings, Pour Over Pages, it's nonsense. Cards that don't do anything. Vizier of Tumbling Sands.
And then black aggro, obviously they all main deck Thoughtseize. But out of the sideboard, you're going to have access to Duress, Leyline of the Void, Agonizing Remorse. So there's a lot there. And then if you're playing a red aggro deck, presumably you're trying to just race. But one of the, you can play Dampening Sphere. Dampening Sphere stops the Lotus stuff pretty well.
Oh, I guess
you're not into it.
Eidolon of the Great Revel seems like a pretty good card also. If you have Eidolon of the Great Revel in play, a lot of
Definitely.
the red decks either play it in their main deck or have it in their sideboard. At least it's messing up their ability to do shenanigans, with the Yawgmoth's Will angle.
Not very much, though. It really doesn't, though. Because Eidolon obviously only hits things that cost 3 or less. Mm-hmm. If you can, I guess, you're going to slow them down. They can't just loop Hidden Strings without actually getting rid of the Eidolon.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
But yeah, no, that's fine. Because looking at it, I didn't realize they don't even play Ratchet Bomb and Blink of the Eye is not exactly the most compelling interaction. It's not like this is a deck that has some red sweeper or something. Man, so that's not bad. Yeah, definitely. Another red sideboard we have here, Quiniax playing with Tormod's Crypt out of the sideboard. And then Scab Clan Berserker. That's a possible sideboard angle.
Get in there.
If you can get in there once, obviously you can lock them out then.
I'm puzzled by the red decks in Pioneer in general. The red is, one of the top 3 most popular archetypes played, but it's this weird red. It's so mid-rangey, so medium. It's got mostly 3 and 5 drops.
What? No. There's such a variety. The red decks I'm looking at, where's a Boozix? 11th place deck, Bomet Courier, Bonecrusher Giant, Eidolon of the Great Revel, Gitu Lava Runner, Monastery Swiftspear, Soulscar Mage, Light Up the Stage, Lightning Strike, Wizard's Lightning, with Ramunap Ruins and Castle Embereth. And this Quiniac list has Kari Zev, Skyship Raider, Goblin, Chain Whirler, 1 Chandra, and 4 Torben, but it's still a through and through red deck. I don't think most of them are playing 5 drops.
The first one that you named, I like this build quite a bit. It's got that mild wizard angle with Gitu Lava Runner, Soulscar Mage, enabling Wizard's Lightning. Autumn Burchett made an interesting observation this week they said, hey, you notice there's all these decks that have exactly 4 Wild Slash. And Autumn's assertion is that these decks are probably misbuilt. And I was like, oh, wow, think about this for a second. Wild Slash and Shock are basically the same card in Pioneer. So having exactly 4 Wild Slash and 0 Shocks seems to be like that wasn't the optimal set of choices. It's just like a default choice.
Oh, yeah, particularly given just how many of these decks are not even playing creatures with power 4 or greater. Right? Like,
yeah. So
it's not like, it's not even, it's like, even if you think that the damage prevention ability is the important part, why aren't you playing 5? It's not like you can actually trigger the Wild Slash, like, I don't know.
Yeah, I love this deck played by Quickie Dick in one of the 5-0s from last week. And that deck had like 4 Wild Slash, 4 Shock, no Lightning Strike, but it was red-green, and the splash was just for Klothys, God of Destiny. And man, Klothys seems so impressive to me in Pioneer. Quickie Dick's deck had the full 8 Spectacles light up the stage and skewer the critics. So just a great way to set up Spectacles, and obviously insane, contextually, right? Like against a blue-white deck, you can eat up their graveyard to prevent them from flipping in as Kanta. You can make their dig through times difficult. Against the Chronic Flooding deck, if you're lucky, you can eat their win condition. What do you think about Klothys? Do you think it's going to be a player, or do you think
Definitely.
mono red?
No, I'm into it.
I'm
like
really
Klothys.
into it. I think
Klothys is great. Yeah, I think Klothys is great. There are 2 Chronic Flooding decks, though, just to be clear. Like, and they're both Chronic Flooding, Underworld Breach, Hidden Strings, blah, blah, blah. It's the same engine underneath. But, Kadunyik 5-0'd with a Is It version. No green. Instead, just playing with Strategic Plannings, Discovery Dispersal, Compelling Argument, Cathartic Reunion, Opt, Baral, Chief of Compliance, and Goblin Electromancer. So this deck is really, really, really trying to just get Hidden Strings, Underworld Breach going. And Chronic Flooding is part of that plan, but this deck can actually do it backup not too bad, because sometimes you're just going to go Compelling Argument. You see, when you have Compelling Argument in your graveyard, you can pay 2 mana and exile 3 cards to mill yourself for 5. And when you have Hidden Strings and Lotus Field, which this deck has 4 Lotus Fields, every time you Hidden Strings, you can spend 2 mana and exile 3 cards to net 2 mana. So if you ever get to a spot where you have 2 Lotus Fields, you can actually net 4 mana every time you go down 3 cards. So if you just start cycling where you go Hidden Strings, Compelling Argument, you've now had to exile 9 cards, but you've milled 10. So you actually get ahead. And then you can intersperse and make you can make extra mana. But the point being, you cycle all the way through your deck, and that's not even counting when you find a Baral, Chief of Compliance, and you just go DI.
What do you think about these 2 builds? Do you think that it seems to me like the Vizier of Tumbling Sands, Chronic Flooding, Lotus Field, Underworld Breach deck is more commonly played than the Baral, Chief of Compliance?
It is, but I think that there's some real value in this spell-heavy deck. Like, take a look at this deck. It's every card in it draws a card. You're not it's like, I don't think it's as fast, but like, I think it's going to be more robust through interaction.
That's a really important thing, I think. Given how, because I don't think any of these,
other than Graveyard Hate,
the white cards we were talking about,
this one's like vulnerable to Graveyard,
all mess up the Chronic Flooding deck, but none of them win outright.
Yeah.
So I think like if you have a situation where you're like, all right, you have a powerful card, this takes out one of my angles of attack, but I can still keep going and I can potentially win, doing this other thing, which is also pretty good. I think that's, especially if you put the opponent in a situation where they just have like the wrong card now. You look like one thing. I guess it doesn't matter that much because people often know what your deck list is now, but like you just prepared for one thing rather than you think, you're playing against one thing, not the other.
I also wonder, Burrell is vulnerable to all the creature removal, but man, is it explosive in this deck. Right? Like, the amount of mana you can just start saving so quickly. Underworld Breach just seems like such a messed up card anyway.
Here's the thing about Underworld Breach. It's like that's like a really mean-spirited version of the card, right? Like, you can plausibly play the original Yawgmoth's Will a bunch of different ways. I know as an often vintage player, you would play Yawgmoth's Will as a death blow hammer that does the most explosive, abusive things all in one turn. But there are players like myself or John Samuel Finkel who just used Yawgmoth's Will as an inspiration, just like a mild little 2-for-1. None of that coming from Underworld Breach. This card is really there to mess you up 100 cards.
Well, sort of. See, one of the things I like about this build is it actually does value Underworld Breach. You see, when you have Underworld Breach and Cathartic Reunion, you can actually go Hidden Strings. Like, even if you don't have any of the flooding stuff and you don't have Compelling Argument, you can go Hidden Strings, Cathartic Reunion back and forth on your Lotus Field. And you actually you don't go off, but for every for every card in your graveyard, you can draw a card. So like on turn 4, you could just use it as a quick draw 4.
Oh, that's pretty hot.
Yeah. Yeah, because like you go, as long as you play the Lotus Field, you play Lotus Field on 3, you can just go little value Cathartic Reunion over and over again, or Strategic Plannings over and over again, and you actually net enough cards so that you're making a card every time you go through the cycle, and it's mana neutral. You're just losing a card from your graveyard each time. Now the thing is that you're doing amazing things. You know what though? Like with Strategic Plannings, a Cathartic Reunion, you put 2 cards in your graveyard. If you're just willing to exile the Strategic Plannings you're still down 1. Yeah, the value I think is just so good to just do that for like 4 or 5 cards sometimes.
All right, so I saw a deck that is also a Thassa's Oracle deck. I saw it. I had to read it like 2 or 3 times, and I was just like, damn. I thought of you. I don't know if this deck is the bomb. It looks like the kind of deck you would be in love with. Do you know what deck I'm talking about?
Of course.
Heir of Elendil's deck, 4 Inverter of Truth, 4 Thassa's Oracle deck.
Well, this is a real deck now. There's other versions. Like Daniel Garcia's list doesn't even use Thassa's Oracle. It's just it does use 4 Thassa's Oracle. Sorry, it also has Jace Wielder of Mysteries is the thing.
This deck's got the one I'm looking's got 3 Jace Wielder Mysteries, 4 Inverter Truth, 4 Thassa's Oracle, and the Scarab God ×1. Long-time top-level podcast favorite, the Scarab God. And like this deck is like it's just like a legit Dimir control deck that sometimes just gets you with Inverter Thassa.
Oh yeah, but there's even more. You see, you get to use Dig Through Time. You can exile your graveyard, dig through time, and now when you Inverter, you're there. You don't even have to try to finesse it with Ops and Thassa's Oracle very much or anything,
So like let me just imagine this for a second. So you're just playing a couple of turns of Magic. You're just like, all right, push that creature, get you with a Censor, opt into my land drop, Tyrant Scorn, blah blah blah. Your opponent just like, all right, I'm gonna I don't know, play an Elspeth or something, play a Dream Trawler, some kind of tapping out, and you're like, all right, dig through time, empty my graveyard, untap 6 mana, Inverter of Truth, Thassa, good game.
That's one way you can do it. Is just on turn 6, you just get it easy. You just drop Inverter and Thassa's Oracle in the same turn because on your opponent's end step, you Murderous Cut or Dig Through Time to exile your graveyard so that you'll have just one card, Dig Through Time or Murderous Cut. You'll untap, draw, Inverter, and when you invert, now you'll have only Murderous Cut or Dig Through Time in your graveyard. And so when you Thassa's Oracle, you win.
I mean, I wish I had bought this deck now. This deck seems fantastic.
And there's a lot you can do here. Like, for instance, you've got Collective Brutality and Thoughtseize already for helping force through, because obviously that combo is very vulnerable to a creature kill spell or something. But the thing is, you don't ever have to go for it.
I don't even. Is it that vulnerable to a creature kill spell? If you cast Thassa's Oracle, doesn't it just check? Or do you count as having Devotion 0?
Oh, sorry. Well, when you Inverter of Truth, your opponent can still respond, right? Like, you get to kill the Inverter in response or kill the Thassa's Oracle. You see, when Thassa's Oracle comes down, if you kill Thassa's Oracle in response and it was your only blue card,
yeah,
X is 0.
Oh, then you don't win. In fact, now you're pretty messed up because you're going to run out of cards.
X is definitely not greater than or equal to the number of cards in your library. So it's pretty rough, you know? Other things you can do, though, like even if you end up not with Dig, like if you don't have Dig Through Time, you can still accelerate it pretty quickly because you get to go Discovery Dispersal to surveil through your deck a little bit or Jace yourself or even just activating the castle, anything, you know, opting. So, but part of the real strength of this deck is that you're not just a hyper fast combo deck. You're a deck that has 4 Fatal Push and 2 Murderous Cut and 2 Collective Brutality. You're a deck with a fair bit of deck manipulation. It's not unreasonable to block with Thassa's Oracle. Bantu's Last Reckoning is another form of creature removal. So you can actually like play a passable blue-black control game for a little while.
I think this is a very passable blue-black control strategy. I mean, you have a lot of real cards. I mean, I could just
a lot of real cards.
I could totally imagine playing like a legitimate match against somebody and just being like, side in, you know, the relevant cards against their strategy and counter and destroy their main stuff, and just like Inverter of Truth is still like a 6/6 for 4. Like that's a very, very good creature on rate, even if you're not comboing with it, right? Like what if you just have good cards in your graveyard?
Well, and remember, as long as you have 2 Inverter of Truths, you don't even have to stress. Because, like, obviously you could just play Inverter of Truth and have, like, 8 cards in your graveyard and be like, okay, hopefully I'll win in the next 8 turns, right? But if you have 2 Inverter of Truths, you never run out. You could just wait until your library is relatively lean. Even if there's no cards in it, you can Inverter of Truths and shuffle your graveyard back.
That's very, very solid. You know, I remember you loving this card when it was around before, and it hadn't had its day in the sun yet, but this seems like a real deck to me. The type of real deck that maybe hasn't lit the world on fire on Miko leagues, but is poised
well, it's
to
starting
like
to.
I feel like it could break
It's shown
out
up a couple times. Yeah, I mean, it's only shown up a couple times, but I think that there's, you know, people are starting to catch on. It's another angle.
I like this deck a lot.
There's a crazy, crazy deck. Where is this? Dude, there's so many decks. We're not even going to be able to scratch the surface. Jeskai Trixie, Jeskai Ascendancy. This is another Underworld Breach deck, but without the flooding or the Lotus. But it's just a Jeskai Ascendancy deck with Sylvan Awakening. Does this do anything for you?
It's very confusing to me. This is just yet another way to take many, many actions in one turn, right? Using Jeskai Ascendancy instead.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's more of that, but it's in a confusing direction.
Yep.
All right, what about Niv Mizzet Reborn with 4 copies of Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath?
Ooh, I'm into it. Right, so the Niv Mizzet deck is certainly going to be a popular deck, I think, at the various player stores. Like, there's any number of different ways that you can build this deck. Typically, it's played with cards like Siege Rhino and Bring to Light, right? You basically just have a bunch of cool cards that have different 2-color combination identities. I think that Uro, the The much talked about 6/6 on this podcast is a great setup card in this deck. Absolutely fantastic, right? You cast it, and it potentially can set you up for your signature card the next turn, even if you don't get the rebuy.
Yep. Would you drop Soloist to play Siege Rhino?
I mean, I think
I'm kind of into it.
Typically, most of the lists that I've seen are like 4 Niv, 4 Bring to Light, and then like 3, if not 4 Siege Rhino. The thing about Siege Rhino is it doesn't have great synergy with Niv Mizzet at all. It does have pretty good synergy with Bring to Light, but the Niv decks are kind of soft to aggro, like depending on build, right? Like Sylvan Caryatid's very good against aggro. Paradise Druid isn't. Depends which ones they're playing. If you're playing against the Ensoul deck and they have like Stonecoil Serpent, most of your removal doesn't even hit it. It depends what you got. I just think that the ability to have a great blocker, great stats for its casting costs, and such a meaningful text box, and then in multiples. That's the thing. You can hit 2 or 3 reliably in a Bring to Light deck. It's just too good against aggro. He has trample.
Well, one of the things you've got access to is the whole Bring to Light to go find Solar Blaze or to go find Languish. Both of which are kind of interesting for a Siege Rhino Niv Mizzet Reborn deck.
Classics, absolutely.
And then the being able to tutor up Slaughter Games, that's kind of cool, right?
I've seen Unmoored Ego played a lot. What do you think about Slaughter Games versus Unmoored Ego? I think Slaughter Games is just better.
I think so. I think Slaughter Games is better to have in your deck as your package, and Unmoored Ego is better to have in your sideboard to just try to draw early.
Because I feel like Unmoored Ego is better insofar that it's less mana than Slaughter Games. But if you only have like one copy in your main deck, and you're probably going to have to get it with Bring to Light anyway, I think this is Slaughter Games is a stronger card overall.
It's also nice to have the option of the one because being uncounterable is pretty dope.
Yeah, I think I'm pro Slaughter Games. The more we just talk about it out loud, and that I mean, how much value do you think Unmoored Ego is generating just from its color combination? Because is there a lot of Rakdos competition for Slaughter Games? Not really, right?
I'm even talking the Slaughter Games in the 5-color, like in the Niv Mizzet Reborn deck.
Oh, no, I agree. I'm just saying, it's just there's competition for color. Right?
Oh, sure.
That's all I'm saying. If you have
both of them are the easy color though. Yeah. There are more black red. There's not really anything you want in blue black. Some people play Hostage Taker, but blue black is actually the softest, which is part of the reason why you might want Unmoored Ego, because black red has Culligan's Command or Dreadbore, any of that type of stuff. The one I thought was really cool is the one-off Kenoros, the Hound of Athreos.
Oh, I haven't seen that one yet.
Oh, yeah. For instance, Put, their 5.0 list featured a one-off to go get with Bring to Light. But if you go get it, you actually lock out all these, the Breach decks. Like the Underworld Breach decks.
That's absolutely fantastic. That could be a card that you play 4 copies of after sideboarding. Or it's just a great card to have in your deck.
It could be. I think you'd be more likely to play 4 copies of it in decks that are a little bit less tutor focused. But even this deck, I mean, they played 1+1.
So the thing is that it's just good to naturally draw that kind of card if you can cast it, because it's so fast. If you're relying on Bring to Light to get it, that's potentially turn 5, probably at least turn 4 if you have an accelerator.
Yeah, usually turn 4.
They might kill you before you can even cast the Bring to Light. That's the thing that I'd be concerned about.
Sure.
But I guess you have tons of different disruption cards, right? If you can get to a Slaughter Games faster or an Unmoored Ego faster or whatever, I guess there's things that you can do.
The last deck I wanted to touch on today was a Leyline of Anticipation, Mono Blue Devotion. Aspiring Spike 5-0'd with a list that used 4 Leyline of Anticipation, partly just because, hey, cards having flash is dope, but partly because it gives you a lot of blue devotion. It has 4 copies of Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. It's got 3 copies of Caliph, Beloved of the Sea. It's got 4 copies of Master of Waves. It's got 3 copies of Thassa, God of the Sea. And it's got 4 copies of Thassa's Oracle. This deck's just all over the place with, and that's Thassa God of the Sea. Remember, that's old school Thassa. That's not the new Thassa.
Does this version have Gadwick in it? Which
Four Gadwicks. Four Gadwicks. The 127. The Pioneer League on 127. Aspiring Spikes list. Four Gatwicks. Okay. And then it's got a pretty nice mix too, because like it skips all the 1-drops. That's the thing. It's how it's making the room. So it's got Merfolk Tricksters, Harbinger of the Tides, and Thassa's Oracle for 2-drops. It's got Gatwick as a 3-drop, and obviously you can do more because Gatwick is high leverage with these insane Nykthoses.
I mean, Gatwick is not a 3-drop in this deck. I mean, I guess if you have Leyline of Anticipation, it's just such a freebie, right?
And then the Leyline of Anticipation means that all these creatures that don't have flash naturally get it, which then makes it even better to tap stuff. And the tapping is very relevant because, like, for instance, Thassa God of the Sea hits for 5, and Caliph is going to frequently hit for like 8.
You like Caliph in this deck?
Yes. And that's to say nothing of the disruption. Creatures and enchantments you control have spells your opponents cast to target this permanent cost 1 more. So, like, when you have Caliph, the disruption to interaction is like a little, just a little bonus. But the fact that Caliph is going to frequently hit is going to be like an 8-3, and you can like flash it down. Your opponent's going to be like, like say your opponent just sweep the board. You go flash down Caliph, untap, drop say Gatwick and a Merfolk Trickster, and then boom, that's just 7 right there. So I think that the amount that Caliph just kind of hits like a truck, that's part of the advantage,
I mean, this deck is obviously profoundly exciting. The prospect of casting a Gatwick at the end of your opponent's turn with Leyline of Anticipation for like 7 cards refill or something is... I mean, who isn't already in love with that idea? So many flexible cards, Brazen Borrower... and also, like, this deck's just got natural advantages against some people, right? Like Master of Waves, Harbinger of Tides. These are the kinds of cards that, like, if you just draw the correct cards and you're playing against mono red, you just start out with a huge advantage.
I mean, even Thassa's Oracle's a 1-3. Sometimes that matters if everybody's wild slashing. But the other thing I really love about this deck is you are so good at Wizards of Retorting. You got Thassa's Oracle, Merfolk Trickster, Master of Waves, Harbinger of Tides, and Gatwick. You're such a good Wizard's Retort deck,
Yeah. I don't even know what kind of deck this is. Is this like a big mana deck? It's not like a fish deck. It's weird because it technically should be a fish deck, right? But it kind of defies category to me at first glance. I feel like it's like a big mana deck. I feel like it's just about casting big things and having a degenerate mana engine. But
that's an aspect it has.
It has a hard counter.
I know, but it's really a fish deck. It really is, because you're tempoing people out. You've got Wizard's Retort for a very light mix. It's not like a fairy deck that has a ton of permission. It's like a fish deck that happens to have 4 Force of Wills. Yours are Wizard's Retort. And then you have all these tempo plays like Brazen Borrower, tap something down. Bounce something. Merfolk Trickster, tap something down. Harbinger of Tides, bounce something. Caliph, making your opponent's spells too expensive, you throw them off curve. Thassa, make stuff unblockable. It really is about tempoing people out.
I like this deck a lot. It's very exciting. I think the sideboard is the least exciting part to me.
Well, it's exciting to me that there's opportunity to improve the archetype.
Okay, I buy that.
Because I don't believe in this sideboard.
Yeah, this sideboard is... Given how exciting the main deck is, the sideboard is so not exciting. It's just like a bunch of medium cards.
Yeah, but I think it's going to get better. When you tune this one sideboard, I think this is a real exciting direction. All right, awesome, dude. So much, and we've only scratched the surface, so probably more Pioneer to come, but see you next week, dude.
Right, absolutely.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge for jail or hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Is your core trapped in amber stasis? Also out of friends,